You could have heard this episode 48 hours early on our Patreon, patreon.com/indieheadspodcast. By joining us for as low as $1 a month, you'll receive episodes early, gain access to our Discord server, and get weekly playlists from the Indieheads podcast crew. All of our upcoming episodes, including our upcoming series, Car Commercial Number 1s, will be up on our Patreon 48 hours before it hits our public podcast feeds. If you're hearing this via our Patreon feed, we thank you so much for your support. Before we begin this episode proper, we want to thank our Real One patrons, including Derek Pemberton, Maze Farms, Bex, Rachel, and Noah. To become a Real One, consider supporting us with a $5 a month donation or more. Anyways, enjoy the episode. You know, 2020, guys, it's just been a dumpster fire, you know? It's just been such an awful year, you know? But at the very least, the music was great, right, guys?
2020 wasn't a dumpster fire. 2020 was a garbage truck on fire driving backwards through a flaming hoop into a nuclear landfill that had been ignited by the largest industrial fire in human history. Am I right, guys?
That's my favorite scene in Tenet.
I mean, Will for Thrill, what's your thoughts on the year 2020?
Well, let's face it. Listening to music this year was not easy. And it's the never-ending whirlwind of 2020. It was tempting. Tempting to crawl into a cocoon of nostalgia.
Hey, at least in 2020, we had WAP, a nasty-ass rap bop to get us through the year.
That's right.
I mean, yeah, we had WAP, we had, Ariana Grande came back, we had Lil Uzi Vert. You guys are having trouble during this pandemic, so I'm gonna save y'all with this music. I mean, we even got, Justin Bieber. He even gave us some extras. He's like, yeah. I know I dropped an album this year, but
he gave us that ooey gooey, that gushy wushy, that icky
yummy,
sticky.
Yummy.
What's that song? Fuck, that song. That sounds bad.
Girl, you got that? Yeah.
I have to say to this pandemic. Thank you. Next.
2020 was the "This Is Fine" dog, except he looks down and shit all in his pants when he was sitting at the table saying "This is fine."
The last time I was this disappointed. The last time I was this disappointed a year, it was when I saw The Rise of Skywalker in the theaters.
Womp womp. 2020 was the fucking Last Jedi of years. In that it was
actually, I think
I don't know.
I was gonna say, actually, I think it was the best year.
I mean, 2020. It was supposed to be the year of 2020 vision, but instead, our vision was more like, XX vision, because we couldn't see anything because we're cooped up inside our houses the whole entire damn time. You know what I'm saying?
Nearsighted, farsighted. More like, I wish this year was in my rear-sighted mirror.
Dill, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this awful, terrible, horrible year?
I just want to start the podcast now.
This is the podcast.
Well, Adam. Actually, we have a special guest of this podcast, Adam Gontier. What are your thoughts on the year 2020?
That's right.
That's right.
I think Butt Rock Number 1s was the only good thing that happened this year.
Honestly, yeah. Truly, yeah.
And it's our gift to the culture.
Our gift to the culture. But we couldn't live in the butt rock world forever,
Look around you. We created this. This wasn't here before.
You see that right there? That's history. Can we talk about real quick Butt Rock? I said sort of ironically that Joe Biden was going to bring back Butt Rock, but since I tweeted that, I have just had to stop going back and using links to bring that to life, because what's the fucking Scott Stapp thing that happened yesterday? He's playing Sinatra in a Ronald Reagan biopic. What?
As one does.
I mean, he's got the range. Have you heard My Sacrifice?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know that he was an actor, a screen performer. Are they making an intentionally bad Ronald Reagan movie? I need to see this now.
It's like when Billy Ray Cyrus is in Mulholland Drive. Eventually he's gonna say the director ruined his life. It's gonna lead to Scott Stapp's daughter becoming a famous child actor.
Is that actually what he's had to say about the movie, that it ruined his life?
Somewhat. He did say that he blames how terrible his life has become because of David Lynch, because he wouldn't have started acting if not for being cast in Mulholland Drive, and if he didn't start acting, he wouldn't be in that television show where he played like basically Chuck Norris but a doctor. his daughter Miley was cast on that show, and then Miley did Hannah Montana, and then obviously we everything that happened since. So it all comes back to David Lynch for Billy Ray Cyrus.
That motherfucker.
That motherfucker. Yeah.
Really, in a roundabout way, we do have David Lynch to thank for Butt Rock.
Much to consider.
Much to consider.
All
right, let's start the show. Let's start the show.
I love this one.
All right, welcome to the Indieheads podcast. I'm your host Matty, aka @MotorVanPrince on Twitter. On this episode of the pod, we have Will for Thrill.
What's I want to give a special thanks to our Patreon family, our Patreon army, with such faces as Space Ghost, Hamson, Sarah 520, all asking for shouts out on this episode. I'm here for you. I got you.
They didn't pay the $5 a month, but still, Will for Thrill. He's just the gift that keeps on giving. He's just such a charitable man. He is. But also in this episode we have Dill.
Hello, Will for Thrill Nation. I'm proud to call myself a Will for Thrill honorary lieutenant.
Wow.
I will not be leading you into battle, but I will proudly stand by your side when the time comes.
Bill will strategize.
And then finally we have Mr. AJ. Welcome back to the pod.
Mm-hmm. I know that some people are going to be upset with our list as we round out our top 5 albums of the year, but I just want to let everybody know that Taylor Swift's Evermore was not legible for consideration as it came out after our cutoff date. But I'm sure you're going to be happy that Folklore is number 1. Sorry to spoil the choice for you.
All right, and thank you for listening to the podcast. We'll be back next year in 2021 with our favorite albums of that year.
But yeah, actually before we get in the list proper, I think basically this is basically the 6th anniversary of the Indieheads podcast, because our first episode was our 2014 album of the year episode. So
what was the album of the year on that one?
I don't know if we did I don't think we did a list. I think we all just listed off 2 records that were our top records, because I know I mentioned Swans as one of mine.
Yeah, and I talked about Benji a lot on that episode. So, we love staying unproblematic in 2020.
But yeah, 6 years. I'll just give my own personal reflections. I still cannot believe that we're still doing this podcast after all these years. I honestly thought this would, I was like, oh, this is a fun idea. And I thought, maybe after a couple months, it would just sort of peter out, but we have stuck around. We are the cockroaches of the indie music podcast world in a way, and like I said, I'm very happy that we've stuck doing this. I'm glad, because again, I say this with complete sincerity. I've met some of my best friends because of this podcast. None of them are cast members. It's all fans of the show. Don't even think for a second that I'm best friends.
I was doing the math today when I was thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, wait, the first episode of the podcast we did was album of the year, 2014. That must have been 4 years ago. That's crazy. And I was like, no, this podcast has been around for 6 fucking years, which is wild, truly wild. I've lived in 4 different cities in that entire time period.
What's that? The Leo Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not going away. I'm not going in here.
I'm not fucking leaving.
I'll be here till I fucking die.
That's
truly,
right.
Yeah. But with complete sincerity, yes, I have, again, I've met so many of my friends because of this podcast. Again, I love the cast that we've put together, especially now that our cast has been pretty much solidified in the last year. Again, just some of my best friends, and again, I'm so proud of everybody. I'm glad that everyone doesn't hate me. That's a real accomplishment, because I was real fucking terrible. I was a real piece of shit back in the day. So I'm glad that you all have stuck with me.
Well, don't be too sure about that one.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Who wants to tell Matty?
Will for Thrill. Do you want me to put my resignation in for the Will for Thrill army? I can do it right now.
We have plenty of members as it is.
Give it 5 minutes, and I think you're going to have another resignation from the Will for Thrill army here, because I heard this man talking sideways out his neck before we started the recording.
Oh.
But yeah, unless you have any thoughts on our 6-year anniversary, again, we want to thank, again, obviously the listeners. We want to thank you guys for sticking with us for so many years. And if you did come to us, I guess this year from the Butt Rock number 1s, or any pretty much this year in general, but especially Butt Rock number 1s, because that was, I think, we were perfectly content doing the podcast every month or so. But I think the Butt Rock number ones, it's so, again, it's weird to say with complete sincerity, Butt Rock kind of saved this podcast. This podcast, like, again, Butt Rock kicked us into high gear in terms of wanting to put out content and getting stuff together. Like, but Butt Rock saved us, and we're here to stay. And once again, if you didn't hear the message at the beginning of the episode, patreon.com/indieheadspodcast. We started that last month. Discord server for just $1 a month. $1 a month. You get into our Discord server, you get episodes 48 hours early, and you get a weekly playlist from the crew. And of course, you want to consider supporting us for higher tiers, $5 a month. You get a bonus episode each month. And we actually have had 2 $20 tier members that have popped up, who are, they're going to hopefully send us a 10-song playlist to review on an upcoming episode. So we're really excited to do that. Again, for just $20. You don't have to do it again multiple periods, just like one $20, for 1 month you'd switch to $20. We will review any 10 songs you give us. So if you want us to review the entirety of Yeezus with the 10 tracks, you can do that. You want us to put together your favorite Blink-182 songs, we will do an episode on that. You want to give us like a bunch of classical music to listen to, it's going to be difficult to do an episode on that, but we'll try our damnedest. So yeah,
if you want to say with slurs, we're not going to do that.
We're not going to say slurs. No, we are unproblematic kings and queens and everything in between on this podcast. So do not dare tempt us. We will never say slurs. That is a Indieheads podcast promise. And I know those promises are kind of empty because we've promised a lot of things that didn't happen, but this time it's for real. But nevertheless, we're here, of course, to talk about our top 5 albums of the year. In case you need a quick recap on our top 10, we had a tie for number 10. Dogleg, Melee, and Young Jesus, Welcome to Conceptual Beach.
Dogleg.
Tied.
Matty, you're reading the list in reverse. You just gave away the top 2 albums of the year. Sorry.
Oh, shit. Well, I might as well keep going then if I've already done it. Number 9, Adrian Linker with Songs. Number 8, Black Dresses, Peaceful as Hell.
Number 7, Nicholas Jar. She made an album.
Number 7, Nicholas Jar, Cinzias, and number 6, Jeff Rosenstock, No Dream. If you want to listen to that episode, of course, it should, by the time this episode is up, it should be up on our public feeds. But of course, if you're listening via Patreon, hey, hopefully you already heard the episode because you subscribed to us for just $1 a month or more, which gave you the episode 48 hours early. So hey, I want to thank our patrons once again. But now, number 5 on the list.
Hold up, Matty. I think we need to give AJ a quick 30-second soapbox to talk about Dogleg.
Okay, true. So AJ, you were not able to make it to the last episode.
Yeah.
So
and I thought about sending in a radio transmission, but I don't know what I could have done aside of just barking noises and yelling for a really long time. And I think pretty much everyone on this podcast and who listens to it is lucky that our album of the year voting happened relatively early-ish this year, or at least we all got our ballots and organized the sheets and sort of knew what our lists was going to be. Honestly, I think it happened probably 24 to 48 hours before Melee really truly infected my brain for the second time. Because I've actually been a fan of Dogleg, I think, for as long as they've existed, to be perfectly honest. They are from very close to where I grew up in Michigan, and I have a few friends who were in sort of local emo bands in Michigan and turned me on to some of their stuff. Shouts out to Complainer, who are a fantastic band. So since their first split, since their first single, their first EPs or whatever, I've been on the Dogleg train. Melee just fucking is a stratospheric accomplishment of rock and roll music made with guitars. I think every song on it is maybe the catchiest song I've ever heard. And since we've made the lists in which Dogleg, I ended up, they just cracked into my top 5. And I think this has been an incredibly strong year for music overall, as we'll talk about on this episode. So Dogleg made it into my personal top 5, but that album I've listened to every day for the past 2 weeks, pretty much multiple times, just been fucking running around my apartment screaming into pillows, yelling in the shower along to every song on Melee. It's a fucking fantastic
Do you know
album.
the lyrics to any of these songs?
No, I kind of just like phonetically yell. I know like every sort of like fourth or fifth word that comes along. I think Fox and Kawasaki Backflip I have most of the words down to, and I really like Cannonball. I really like War Turtle, and I'm sure
Hotlines has emerged as my favorite.
Hotlines is great. Yeah, Rose said it best when like every song on that album is kind of just like the one that sounds like this, or where the chorus is like that version of yelling. Shouts out to the motherfucking boys, Dogleg. They're gonna make the best album of all time in like 2 years or next year or something. Like their next record is gonna be big time.
They've blown up surprisingly a lot.
I'm like shocked, yeah, that when they got Best New Music, I was really taken aback because I was like, that just sort of feels like, to be like Jeff Rosenstock hasn't gotten a Best New Music, to kind of be a Pitchfork approved emo band like Oso Oso, you have to make the rounds, really put in your work, put in your time, and just Dogleg coming out hot. I lament every day that I was not able to see Dogleg tear it up on Blue Stage at the Pitchfork Music Festival this year, and just Dogleg beer is going to happen one day, and I think that is my vaccine. That's worth living for.
I told you the vaccine already existed. It's a picture of the Japan Droids beer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just thinking of the meme. It's like if you've consumed the Japan Droids beer, don't worry about what's in the vaccine.
I still have one in my apartment. That's the most pathetic thing about me as a human being.
Do you have the can, or do you have like an unopened one?
It's an empty can. I cut the lid off of it, and it's like it's a decoration in my apartment. Like the like guys really live like this and don't see the problem is me with like a Japan Droids beer framed on my mantelpiece.
I don't know why that never got like an official release outside of the festival.
The Pitchfork beers never do that. That Parquet Courts one was okay.
I liked it.
Which one was 2017? Who got the beer that year?
That was
because I think I was underage, so I only got a sippy.
I believe that was the Stranger. Whoever does the score for Stranger Things, it was Survive.
Oh,
the band wasn't that, or the beer wasn't that bad.
I know Twin Peaks, the band had one that I thought was pretty decent. It was, I don't know. Anyways, we're not here to rank our favorite Pitchfork brews.
We're here to talk about Natural Light.
Welcome to the Brewheads podcast.
Hashtag sponsored by Natty Light.
I'm sipping on a Naturday as we speak. A delicious strawberry lemonade flavored beer to make every day feel like Saturday.
See, if you're not subscribed to us on Patreon, this is what you're missing out on, because you get to hear these gems early. You get to hear our Natty Light sponsorship plugs before anybody else.
You get advertised directly to.
Exactly. But okay, we need to get top 5. Dill, what is our number 5 pick for album of the year?
At number 5, it is the funniest album now of the entire year for me. It's Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. This album, this one has like inadvertently like shot to the top of my list as well, but for like a completely different reason, and that's because of just the inescapable like amount of angry nerd vitriol that like has just consumed all of like online like indie rock discourse over like the past month or so.
Yeah, I feel like there are really two spheres about it, because my big personal change in 2020 has been getting really into TikTok. It's where the youths are. It's where the kids are at. And I'm on something called Phoebe Bridgers TikTok. So every day I log on there, and it's a different depressed lesbian teenager crying to one specific lyric from Punisher and kind of breaking down in like an essay length thesis exactly why this song is about her failed relationship with Conor Oberst, et cetera, et cetera. So like there is. And I think this is the prevalent universe in which this album, I believe rightfully so, is critically acclaimed and beloved as one of the very best artistic achievements in music and songwriting this year. Every time I listen to Punisher, I am more and more impressed with just how deftly handled all of the songwriting is, and how Phoebe has like immensely grown as a storyteller from Stranger in the Alps. But there has been as Dill was alluding to, a pretty harsh just sort of backlash to what I'm calling the Run the Jewels effect, which is Phoebe Bridgers on every late night show imaginable, like more than once, honestly, and a true inundation of Phoebe Bridgers content.
She's had 7 late night appearances I've seen, so she has to have been on some shows twice by now.
She was on James Corden twice, I think, as of like earlier this week. I'm pretty sure.
Would.
They should put Phoebe Bridgers in Cats too, is just a thought that I had. But like, yeah, Dill, I don't know if you want to talk more about like why people are upset or whatever, but I think the realization that I came to today is like, and I don't know who is actively trying to do this, but Phoebe Bridgers is kind of like being turned into indie rock's Jennifer Lawrence. That's just like, oh, she's like cool and relatable and is hip or whatever.
She did it to herself.
I don't really know how it happened, and it's kind of bullshit to speculate on it. The thing that's important to me, though, is that Punisher is a fucking fantastic record and a huge glow up. I remember when Stranger in the Alps kind of came out of nowhere and then got much more popular over time, but it did not make a big impact when it landed. And she's, obviously been on that motherfucking grind with Better Oblivion, Community Center, and the Boy Genius records since then. And so this was kind of like leading into Punisher was sort of just like everybody sort of knows Phoebe Bridgers and for the most part like likes Phoebe Bridgers and her styling, but it's been a minute since we've kind of had like the breakthrough moment for her. Punisher was teed up to be that, and I think she knocked it out of the motherfucking park. Or what do you golf on? A course. She really hit a hole in one with this one.
It's a great job of fixing that analogy.
Thank you. We'll fix it in post.
Yeah. No. No, I agree. I mean, we can talk. This record has been like discussed like front to back like over and over again. It's kind of beating a dead horse. I feel like talking about the level of like musicianship and maturity in the songwriting that Phoebe is focusing on here. I think we talked about it on a podcast earlier this year as well, where I had to like vehemently defend it once again from a monstrous ravenous horde of absolute plebeians. But you know what? It's fine. But I mean, yeah, talking about this record now, like in the middle of like, it seems like album release part 2 now. In like the last month or so, with like list season kind of going into full swing and everything like that, Phoebe keeps placing in like the top 5 on almost every single publication's list,
including the Indieheads podcast.
Yeah.
A funny thing about that though, there was like a sort of like shared Google sheet going around that was like, oh, we compile like all the music publications lists, so you don't just get one perspective, you get all of them. And Punisher was like the number 1 on that list by a pretty significant margin. But I don't think I've seen very many publications give this album.
I saw it number 2, like
the number 1. Yeah.
Up Rock did that. Like they did that thing. Like they have like 270 different critics from different publications, and they ranked it number 2 of the year. Which sounds about right to me.
Yeah, it's. I mean, talking about like the record itself for just a minute. I mean, AJ is right in that she really did knock it out of the park with this one. She teed it up to be this sort of grand, collection of everything that she's been working on over the past 3 years with Stranger in the Alps and Better Oblivion and on Boy Genius. I had to think about that for a second because I completely forgot that project.
The tough thing is it's called Boy Genius, but they're all ladies. What's up with that? What's going on?
Yeah, that's so weird.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And we can also talk about Boy Genius as well, because like out of the 3 on there, along with like Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus, and we were talking about this a couple weeks ago in the Discord, where like Phoebe has obviously been like the biggest one to blow up, which is a little surprising because I think back in like 2017 or 2018, I absolutely would have put my money on Julian.
Well, but the thing is, I mean, like, think about it. I mean, that's something we've also been talking about is how, like, I mean, like, Phoebe Bridgers is like the extroverted people person, funny online one.
She does have like the biggest social media presence, which
She's pretty,
perhaps is
she's
all you
blonde.
need.
It's just like it makes to me it makes perfect sense why she's the breakout star rather than Julian or Zusi.
What's so impressive to me about this record in particular, like every time I listen to it, I feel like I have a different favorite song, and that's not even getting into like the lyrical nature of it, which I think is all really sharp and really strong and feels informed from such a well experienced perspective. But it's the varied instrumentation all over all of the tracks. Kyoto is my number one favorite song of the year. I don't really know if we're like doing a formal song of the year list or whatever, but like easily with a bullet, Kyoto I think is the best song I've heard all year.
Well,
with
AJ,
perhaps one exception.
Well, it's funny you say that, AJ, because of course our number 2 song of the year was Kyoto by Phoebe Bridgers.
Yes.
Now, what
was our
was
song
our
of the
number
year?
1? AJ, do you know what our song of the year was?
Our number one song of the year, of course, I believe, had to be "The Reason Acoustic" by Hoobastank.
That is correct.
And the thing
It's
is,
not a perfect year-end list, okay?
yeah, the thing is, that's kind of cheating a little bit because, you know, it's Song of the Life. It has existed before our time. It will exist after our time, as simplified by Hoobastank's infinity sign logo, you would know. But this year deserved, 2020 being such a rough year, it deserved the chance to put The Reason back in the spotlight. So that's why we did that. But okay, back to Kyoto. The horn section rips, obviously. I love I See You, which is literally just a song off Neon Bible. And then the quieter moments have been the ones that are sticking with me lately. Like Savior Complex was never a favorite of mine until I really like dug into it after the music video came out recently. I've always been on the Graceland 2 train, which is a big hit on Phoebe Bridgers' TikTok. And songs like Chinese Satellite and Moon Song, I think, are like maybe the most explicitly sort of like sad or emotionally resonant moments on the album, which are really fantastic. I hate to say it too. I've sort of turned around on I Know the End a little bit. I think obviously it's really great in what it does, but I think it's sort of like I haven't listened to it very. I kind of peter off by that time when I throw Punisher on these days, and I think it's just a case of it being so bombastic and so out there that it kind of doesn't vibe into the rest of the album for me. But that's really, I think it's great overall. And I gotta say it, unfortunately, the haters are going to be in the comments on this one. Garden Song was never good. It was a bad first single for this, and so I had a little trepidation going into this album because I was worried that it was just going to sort of be, I don't know, I don't want to say like a victory lap, but a more understated kind of second record from Phoebe Bridgers. And thankfully, you get
That's
Garden
exactly
Song.
what it is.
You get Garden Song out of the way first. Will for Thrill. I don't want to hear it, brother. You get Garden Song out of the way first, and then it's a fantastic like hit after hit. Literally, Phoebe misses once on this album. It's Garden Song, and then the rest of it is wall to wall heaters. I think this is a tremendous record. Easily in my top 5 of the year, personally.
Yeah, she's just kind of a master of tone in the songs and building atmosphere, even all the way going back to Stranger in the Alps. She just has this really natural control over the way that her songs are going to develop and the worlds that she wants to kind of hold them in. Which I think for kind of like a minimalist singer songwriter like this is one of the most important aspects of her type of music, because then otherwise you're either relying entirely on your lyrical content or it just all falls apart. Um, but yeah, it's such a strange record to talk again. It's such a strange record to talk about now, particularly with the amount of attention that it's brought her. And again, I do think that the pandemic and just adapting so well to the new hell world
The new
environment,
normal.
the new abnormal, as one would
Hey,
put it, has
Again,
really
Strokes.
can't
God,
give
I
away.
thought there was...
We can't give away our number
we're
one
getting
pick.
to the story.
Yeah, we're
Matty, don't
getting
worry.
there.
Okay, thank you.
No, she's adapted incredibly well when other musicians really haven't this year, I think, and being able to completely control an online space. And I was talking about this earlier today as well, wherein she straddles almost the exact same like fan base line that Mitski does. And I feel like the press release cycles for Punisher and Be the Cowboy are incredibly similar in the amount of coverage that they've gotten and the amount of acclaim that they've gotten. But Phoebe was really just teed up really well to just control the entire summer, and that's pretty much what she did. She had this whole lane to herself that she ran with all year, and I think it should be credit should be given onto her part and to her uh, press staff and anyone else over at Dead Oceans for being able to just tee her up as this just absolutely monolithic figure in music this year.
Okay, before we continue, Dill, I think I heard like a hospital thing going off next in the background, which I really love because you're really getting into the character of Phoebe Bridgers by also living next to a hospital, presumably.
I think that's me. I live very close to a senior center, unfortunately, so I get the morbid sounds sometimes.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think that's kind of a good point that you make about her in the pandemic. Is that like a band like Dogleg? I think they were able to thrive this year in spite of not being able to perform live, which would have done gangbusters for them. But I think that I mean Phoebe Bridgers, she was going to be open for the 1975, I think, so that would have gotten her a lot of exposure. But I think at this point, like after this cycle, she's a headliner now.
She's absolutely a headliner.
But at the same time, though, her songs don't. I mean, like she plays like slow ballads. You don't need to be in a live environment.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today when I was listening to Punisher in the shower, where I was like, when I go to see Phoebe Bridgers live, like what's that? I think like obviously Kyoto pops off, right, and some of the faster songs I'm into, but like it's gonna be kind of a like I don't think I would want Phoebe to be like the first show I go to post pandemic. That's what I got the dog leg bullet in the chamber for that one.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably going to be more akin to like a Julian Baker concert, and I've seen Julian live, and it's very soft and it's very quiet in the crowd, and everyone's very static and still.
But at the same time, because of how popular Phoebe is, like she's gonna get like a huge crowd that they don't all know how to act right.
Yeah. I mean, the moral of the story with Phoebe is that if you market specifically to lesbians, you're going to succeed one way or the other.
Lesbians are the biggest corner of the market.
What's the Marco Rubio quote? Let's not pretend that Phoebe Bridgers doesn't know what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing.
That's what I thought when she did that. When she did the titty shot in the magazine, like, she knew exactly what she was doing there.
So Phoebe Bridgers fans on TikTok, again, this is what I've learned by infiltrating the youth. They call themselves Farbs, PHARBZ. Just wanted to
AJ, I don't believe you. This is exactly like that one the Pitchfork article that tried to redeem Pine Grove when they said the fans call themselves Pine Nuts. That wasn't as someone that was
okay.
As someone who's a big
our fans are
as someone who was a Pine Grove stan.
Wasn't it always Pine Grove Hive? That was always what it was.
I remember the Pine Nuts.
I liked Pine. I don't remember this,
MK Ultra is real. It has infiltrated the indie fan base. It has evolved. We're debating the merits of Pine Nuts, Pine Grove Hive, and what was Farbs?
So Farbs, PHARBZ.
Like barbs.
I believe that's the thing, yeah. But it exists. I'm on TikTok. So find me out there.
I didn't know that until tonight that you were a TikTok guy.
I've been really getting into it. This is not important for the podcast at all. My algorithm has been so perfectly curated that's like it just feeds me like Star Wars and indie rock content. TikTok rules. Shout out to the Chinese Communist Party.
That was the thing of like people freaking out about TikTok. It's like, oh, the Chinese government, they're gonna have your data. It's like, you know who currently has your data? The fucking NSA.
Dog. If the Chinese want my data, they fucking have it. I don't care.
Xi Jinping, if you please subscribe to the venture capitalist tier on the Indieheads podcast, so we can use your Chinese money to compete with the likes of Pitchfork and Uprocks, because we will be
President Xi. We will bring back the Cummy Awards. Just we need your monetary support.
Okay. Have we had any more? Do we have any more thoughts on Punisher, or are we ready to go to number 4?
It's really fucking good. It's a very, very good album.
It rocks, it whips, it makes me sad, it makes me happy. It's a fantastic album, and you know what? Nerds can stay mad.
Die mad haters.
Die mad.
Who's mad?
Please
What do you
don't,
guys
think?
don't actually die.
Die
What do you
Please
guys-
don't actually die.
Do you guys think? I think Die Mad would actually be a good name for Phoebe's next album.
It'll be
I should
it'll
see
be
it.
it'll be a collab with Playboy Cardi.
Yeah, she tweeted earlier this year that the next album was going to be called Fucklore, which I think she might actually pull through on. But Die Mad would also
Everything
be...
she tweets, like, you have to take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean it's the word of God. Nobody goes on the internet and posts lies. Who would do that?
We didn't even mention that she has like a feature on the latest Kid Cudi album.
I think we're all distracted by Alphonse getting just like.
I don't want to talk about the Kid Cudi album, or someone's going to knock at my door.
I might cut this. I might cut this out of the main episode just because we need to move on. But like seeing people, like the amount of comments be like, "Why would you have a biased reviewer do this?" And it's just like, oh wow, like, oh boy,
And you're not biased.
Yeah.
Oh no, I would never. I'm never biased.
No,
I'm the
No,
least.
I'm talking
unbiased
about
man.
the person complaining of the biased review.
Oh yeah, no. It's just it's funny because I would be like, okay, so do you want like a Cudi superfan to review them? It's like, no, I want someone objective. And it's just like, so you want like a baby? You want like a
You should let me review the Kid Cudi album. I think every album he's ever put out is a 10 out of 10. You should let me review it.
Even Speed and Bullet to Heaven, even that's a 10.
Wizard.
Bro, you're gonna make fun of Speeding Bullet to Heaven? He had depression, dude. That's fucked up.
Andre 3000 love that album. You gonna hate it?
I actually do
That's a
wish
re-
more
that-
artists just released albums like that. Just go all the way, you know. Fucking go
in
for
a
it.
way I agree with you, Will. I do wish more artists would just like be fucking morons and just do a really risky record that nobody's gonna like. And I mean that sincerely. I mean that like completely sincerely. I would like a lot more risk in pop.
Like
music
we
where it's
love when Radiohead went to electronic with Kid A and it was a masterpiece, but it could have just as easily been just like a pile of freaking shit or whatever. That's what Speaking Bullet to Heaven could have been a masterpiece. It just wasn't.
It could have been another Kid A.
It could have. He wouldn't know if he hadn't made it. We would never know. Now we know.
I mean, it could have been the next funeral for all we know.
The next funeral.
Of course, that ended up being, that was ended up being
Denial.
Psychopomp.
That was Psychopomp.
Many people were saying Teens of Denial, but I doubt their claims.
Under the guise. So next we're gonna have Indie Rock's Speeding Bullet to Heaven, and I cannot wait to see what that is.
Oh God! All right.
We already did
anyways.
it. It's called freaking Everything Now.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, I think. Well, okay.
No.
But sincerely, like again, it's got to be a indie rock person pivoting to hip hop. I think that was like Field Medic because they tried doing that, and then
Wait, seriously?
actually, no, I think.
Killed.
Yeah, I think basically Field Medic like they relapsed and got addicted to drugs again, and then started doing like emo rap, and then they got sober. Like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that shit. And
I think one of the best conversations we've ever had as a collective podcast unit. And I don't think it was on the air, but we had like a short running bet that was like, who's gonna have a rap, like a formal like credited rap feature on an album first, Tame Impala or like Arcade, or like I think it was who's gonna be the first kind of like big indie band to have a credited like rap feature on their album, and the two contenders that we pitted against each other was like Arcade Fire or Tame Impala. And I think that Cold War, that nuclear arms race is still on, because I could see it going either way.
I mean, speaking.
Wait,
Talk about the
Tame-
memory hole. That I'm shocked that Tame Impala didn't have a hip hop feature on their album.
Yeah.
That's a real stunner. No Travis Scott.
Tame Impala would have done like, I mean, I guess like Vampire Weekend kind of did it on Father of the Bride with oh my God, I'm blanking. They had Steve Lacy, right? And he wasn't really rapping.
He's
he was
not a
kind of
rapper.
just like,
He's a guitar
No.
player.
That's true.
I mean, I am trying to think of like an indie, a quote unquote like indie record. That is like let's just like just straight up like indie rock record that has a rap feature.
Bro,
I
wish the new
I think-
Abnormal had a like a hard like fucking Nas verse or something on it. That would have
They
been
definitely would have had a
so
whole
good.
head like
Yeah, that would have been so
Wu-Tang
good.
guy on there for
Well,
sure.
actually, hang on. Actually, it's funny that we're mentioning like rap features on like non hip hop albums because our next album on our list actually does have that. Number 4,
God.
10 Tricks Point Never, Magic 10 Tricks Point Never.
Got him!
The Nolan Berlin verse that that is incredible, because again, because it's not it's not like he doesn't have like a specific credited feature on that, so you could go to Genius.
I thought it was Jeannie Lopes saying the N-word.
He has been listening to a lot of Red Scare, probably, so I believe
God.
it.
There's no feature, so it must have been him.
We promised we were not going to clown on him like that. We promise.
Yeah,
Danny,
Danny, I'm so sorry.
That is the extent of that is the extent of the jokes we're going to make about Red Scare and Mr. Danny Lopatin. But Dill, we are so sorry. We are so sorry.
I can't believe, Matty, you took one of my favorite albums of this year, Jukebox Danny, Depressive Danny, and you started it off on literally the worst foot I could have possibly.
I have one thing I want to say that I've been thinking about for a really long time, that like, since we're already so deep in the shit, I just want to, if everyone can walk through this thought process with me. So like The Weeknd has sort of an uncredited feature on No Nightmares, which is sort of like the love ballad of this album, right? It's kind of just like the most explicitly sort of like emotional and romantic song. That's what The Weeknd does. And we know that Danny is romantically involved with Dasha from Red Scare. And so I just think it's an incredible bamboozle that he got The Weeknd to sing a love song about Dasha from Red Scare. And I'm sorry, and I will shut up now.
Yeah, I've heard
okay.
it.
No Nightmares, not in this relationship.
No Nightmares is one of the best songs on this album, though.
It absolutely is.
I Don't Love Me Anymore has also really that. Speaking of late night performances on Punisher, the late night performance he did of I Don't Love Me Anymore, like completely. I never disliked the song, but it was kind of one of the ones where I was like, right, like this album really works well as a tone piece and an album that mostly flows entirely together, and I'm not paying attention to the track list. That performance of this song just instantly skyrocketed up to one of the like, damn, holy shit, my man Danny snapped with that one.
The dude who fucking invented vaporwave is now playing on Jimmy Fallon late night, which I like.
Floral
I
Shop
still
played on late night.
This album, to that point though, this album feels like such a fucking victory lap, and like I sort of ironically said it earlier, but such a flex. Like the deal with this album is he did make almost all of this entirely during like this year during quarantine, right? But it feels like such a, like Danny has had so many wild collaborations and sort of like spin-offs and whatnot, not even to mention like the Safdie brothers and all of that stuff. He's been like all over the place putting in the work. Like he's one of my favorite artists. I'm sure plenty of people on the pod also love him very much, but this album just feels like such a triumph, and it's one that feels like very pointed and personal to him. You can feel exactly what he's doing with it, and it feels like fucking flipping through radio stations on like a late night drive up the West Coast or something, like in the dark, all of these images and all of these emotions flashing through you. I think he just like fucking nailed exactly what he was going for with this album. I'm super happy for him, and I love listening to it because this album is bonkers in so many ways.
Yeah, no,
I
you
our
hit
boy
it.
is glowed up.
Yeah, he really did. He's hot now. My man's hot now.
Yeah. That's
He's a
the Dawson
cutie.
glow.
I want to give him a smooch. Like, I mean, the dude went again, like 10 years ago, like he was making like echo jams and
Dude, he was
know,
probably posting on Mew himself.
he was absolutely posting on Mew. He like dropped like replica in like a mega file.
Yeah.
And now he's like just hanging out with The Weeknd and collaborating with like the biggest.
There's like a non-zero.
American
There is a
directors.
non-0% chance that he's going to perform at the Super Bowl this year.
I hope. Him and The Weeknd, they need to make an EP. I'm just sorry.
They fucking should. They really fucking should.
They work well because he nails The Weeknd's dark, moody thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're good together.
Mhm.
I would.
I mean,
because like I think the collabs at After Hours, they're fine, but like No Nightmares is like one of the best Weeknd songs. If we're counting that as a Weeknd song, it's one of his best that he's dropped in a pretty decent amount of time.
True.
Although
Like I remember listening to it for the first time, and when his vocals just come in, it's literally that moment where it's like Binky from Arthur puts on the headphones and he sort of astral projects out of his body. Like, that happened to me when those smooth croons from Abel just came in over the Danny production. It's so good.
I now that I'm thinking about it, because I'm thinking about how my relationship with this album, we haven't even really talked about the album like a whole lot itself just yet.
It's pretty dense to unpack, to be honest. That's like the one thing I could hold against it, is a lot of it is interludes and cut ups outside of a few of the centerpieces, but I love it that way. I called it like a tone piece or whatever earlier before. Like, when I listen to this album, it is start to finish focused listen. I'm in the OPN zone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll get to that in a second. But like, I was thinking about my relationship with this album because I've been listening to Danny since like high school with like R+7, and since then, like I've just devoured all of his stuff, and he's become like one of the biggest just influences on like art and creativity that I've had in my life. And to like see him glow up with this album, not just musically, but just in collaboration, in the amount of like outpouring of love that he's getting from all of these different artists. This is not a bit, this is not a joke, but like, this must be what like AJ felt during like the Everything Now like press tour. Just
You're darn
just like
tootin'.
pride just pouring out of me, and I'm like, I'm happy to be a fan right now.
It's true though.
Yeah.
They're out there doing exactly what they want to be doing. This album feels, in a way, his stuff has always been very esoteric, and I think that is by design. And this, like, there's something celebratory about this one, and even just in the name of it, the Magic 10 Tricks Point Never, which like harkens back to, it's essentially like giving away the bit and dropping the facade of like his name, as an artist, and the whole project he's set up for himself of just being like, yeah, like, it's a misheard radio station title, and the construction of this album is going to harken back to like my experience with discovering music and falling in love with music and listening to it in that way, and sort of these interludes that like you can't tell what's constructed and what's like just real radio bits that we're pulling off. And all of my influences are converging in one way that just you can very clearly track what has influenced my sound and led me to making the music that I do. It's so I feel very happy for him when I listen to this album. It feels very like he set out to do one explicit thing and he just fucking nailed it, in the same way that we were talking about with Phoebe Bridgers. Like, they just fucking nailed these albums, and it's so great to see.
Hate to go to sleep because of the dread that's in my head. Hate to go to sleep because of the dread that's in my head. Hate to go to sleep because of the hate to go to sleep because of the hate to go to sleep because of the dread that's in my head.
All right, folks, we are back. We had some technical difficulties. We again, someone
there is a
mentioned
specter haunting the Indieheads podcast, and lose everything now.
Exactly. So
workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chemistry.
It crashed the Zencastr app, so we were missing out on some of the things. So we're just gonna dive right back into it. Dill, you are on a scheme that I missed. So Dill, I will let you take it away with more your thoughts on this record.
I should have known that mentioning the accursed album around AJ would have just made an energy field that was just too much to handle. No. So anyway, talking about this album is weird in sort of the context of Dan's discography, in that he's treading a whole lot of normal ground for him, and his feelings of nostalgia and over consumerism and late stage capitalism, and these feelings of loss and isolation in just a weird techno babble world. And that's a similar thing that goes all the way back from all the way through R+7 and Replica and Garden of Delete. all the way back through all of his riff stuff. And he's tried on various different hats and styles to explore these themes, whether it's noise and drone and progressive electronic, or if it's whatever the hell you want to describe Garden of Delete is, or even on Magic Wonder Tricks Point Never. He continues just refreshing this ground in a way that's incredibly vibrant, and even on MOPN, he's still doing it in a way that I don't know if this caught it in like the old audio, but I mentioned that his way of using radio transmissions and broadcasts in such a way on this album, in terms of interludes and these fuzzy fadings in and out through static, like you're kind of turning a dial, or driving a car and you're switching a channel over. It sort of mythologizes what he's been exploring this entire time. He's mythologizing and making this sort of weird form of Americana out of his music, and questioning the way that we consume art and we consume music, and that we just have these kind of collections of songs and sounds and voices that just stick with us whenever we're driving, or whenever we're walking down the street, or just kind of sitting at our desk at work, or on our way home. And these collections of all of this babble is something that Dan has also done himself in these avant-garde experimentations with plunderphonics and sampling, and vaporwave on its own, and these sort of machinations and manipulations of all of these different collages of sounds and found footage. So he's taking all of this and just kind of, again, reconstructing in his own way a strangely idealized version of American radio, and what that means for everyone who's experienced it in whatever form it comes from.
It like feels like his most overtly pop record in some ways too. I think all of that tracks and is consistent
definitely
with exactly what he was trying to do with the record. But just like, yeah, the features, probably the most traditional vocal performances in this album. Like I mentioned the I Don't Love Me Anymore performance, but like to see him singing on a song like that is really kind of transformative to your perception of AOTYcast Point Never kind of as an artist, or like, a performance piece or whatever it is. But I just think it's a tremendous achievement.
Yeah, it is definitely his most pop record. He's always had these sort of leanings though, whether it's like hypnagogic pop, or even on Age of, he's had sort of these like inklings of using vocal melodies.
Yeah, and I thought Age of was low key a dud. I was big on Garden of Delete and obviously all of the older stuff, but Age of, aside from like Babylon and some of the bigger songs on that, just kind of like was a miss overall for me, whereas Magic is like a big slam dunk.
Yeah,
to keep in the realm of sports metaphors that I'm on tonight.
Yeah, and I think you can't also overstate the influence of collaboration has had on him in getting him kind of out of this like isolated, I only make the bleep bloops and the harsh noises and nothing else zone, whether it's doing the work with Anoni on her record from a few years ago, or whether it's collaborating with FKA Twigs, which we still haven't heard of, by the way. We still don't have any of that, and I'm really upset.
I think there's one song on Magdalene that he helped produce, and then there was like the Nike commercial thing that she did. That was mostly the stuff they produced, but like the stuff that we heard at like Pitchfork the Pitchfork Fest in 2016, a lot of that stuff still has been like, we haven't got a proper release of that. So I do wonder like what happened there, I guess. But actually, I want to counter AJ on the AJ thing. I actually love Age of course, R+7, that's my favorite OPN album, but I actually really loved Age of more than Garden of Delete, and of course that's a weird take considering that my origins, of course, come from butt rock and nu metal, all these things. That's like the first music I fell in love with. But I really did love Age of, and I did like the fact that it was sort of more open to collaborations. I did love that it was very similar to R+7, that it was very like a very cold record. But I did love Danny experimenting with his voice more and more pop, not exactly pop songwriting, but definitely leaning towards that direction more. I think it's like whatever he was doing on Age of, I think that's what he's doing on this record too, of like, but it's just that evolution of that more like, okay, I was trying out some things with this sort of like more pop focused songwriting, but I'm really expanding on that a bit more on parts of this record, not all of it, mind you, because again, there's this record I think as we've mentioned is sort of, in a way, he's described it as being sort of this all encompassing OPN record, like, hey, this is like everything I've done in my career so far, and also what I'm doing next, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, R+7 is like, other than this record, R+7 is definitely probably his most like straightforward record. Garden of Delete is like, if you spent like way too much time on like CS Source and E-Bomb's World, like that's absolutely going to be the album for you. But this record was just a really nice end point to the One of Tricks Point Never moniker. He has mentioned in interviews that this might be the last record that he puts out as One of Tricks Point Never, and that he might shift more towards like just self-titled releases, as Daniel Lopatin.
Uncut Gems too.
That's interesting, because I know because he went under Daniel Lopatin for the Gym soundtrack, and I was like, oh, that's odd, because he went under 10 Tricks for a Good Time, so it's like, oh, okay, but probably just wants to. It's pretty clear that he's going to be doing a lot more film score work in the next couple of years, so I imagine I was like, okay, so it's just sort of separating those two things, but the fact that he might be doing that, he might just be Daniel Lopatin from now on. That's it. I do wonder if he sticks with it, because I don't. Here's the thing, there's some artists that can like do that name change and stick with it, but like they're never gonna do it. Like I honestly thought Earl Sweatshirt was gonna change it, like he was just gonna go under his real name of Tebe, but he never ended up doing that. So
yeah, it's kind of like he doesn't have the clout to pull off the name change, but it's almost like he might, by the nature of, as we were talking about, like if he actually does get like a credited weekend feature or whatever, he might just, it's a real we are really not giving Danny the best like comparisons or being as reverent as we should, but it's a real Filthy Frank to Joji situation where like people might see Daniel Lopatin and be like, love that dude, like he works with the Weekends and made the Uncut Gems soundtrack, where people are like, well, like you should check out One of Tricks Point Never, like you have no idea what he really was. It's the same sort of thing there.
But the thing
is
that like
same thing.
It's literally the exact same thing.
But also, like, why would you abandon a name as cool as One of Tricks Point Never? It's like one of the coolest like artist names ever. Like, why would you abandon that? Like I get why Phil Overham eventually abandoned the Microphones, because Microphones, it's a fine name, but like Mount Eerie, that's a fucking sweet ass band name. Yeah. But again, I don't want to get too into Phil Overham's work. Spoilers. But yeah, again, I haven't said a whole lot about this record. I don't love it as much as everyone else does, but I do think it's a very good record. I think, like, as AJ said, it's a really dense record. There's a lot you have to, like, dive into because there's so much going on. And so there's, like, certain sections, of course, that I love. Obviously, the first section that got released, the one that contains Long Road Home, which Long Road Home, that might be my favorite OPN song he's put out since Zebra. Even like I think that's
that one's
song.
So good.
But obviously No Nightmares is great. I Don't Love Me Anymore, that was one that like it, gotta give credit where credit is due. The video for it, or the live performance for Fallon that Dasha directed, that really put me okay, this is a really great song. Like it made me understand it a bit more. And then I know you don't like the Nolan Berlin feature, but I think it's fine as someone who appreciates when I do actually listen to like some of the stuff that like Alphonse recommends on the ones like your Detroit scammer rap, like it do be hitting sometimes, but there's obviously there's just a ton of really like crazy interesting ideas going on here, and then but yeah, it's definitely like compared to even for OPN, like this is a really dense record. Like it's probably his most dense album to dive into. It's simultaneously his most like his most mainstream appealing record, but also there's so many like weird fragments to get into at the same time. It's just sort of it's a record that I'm excited to dive in a bit more into in 2021. Although I will say I don't know if we mentioned Caroline Polachek. She features throughout the record. I know we mentioned a weekend and OPN project, but goddamn, I really do want more Caroline and Danny collabs, because I think
Caroline's on it, Anoni's on it, Arca's on it. Hudson Mohawk, I think, did something for it somewhere.
Probably.
I think, yeah,
probably because they did the Anthony record together.
Yeah. I think it also just like cements Dan as this sort of like weird like electronic dad, like of this generation of artists and experimenters, because he's gone from everyone between Twigs and Hudson Mohawk and Arca to James Ferrero and Tim Hecker, and he's put on all these different hats, and everyone clearly loves the guy, to the point where this sort of reverence and even mythologizing around the One of Chokes Point Never name itself seeps into this album. Everything from the title of it to the way he deals with some of these themes of like, what does it mean for an artist to eventually have an identity that might become too big for oneself. So that's like the last that's the last thing I'm gonna say about this record, because I know we need to move on.
Yeah,
I
haven't said much about this one. I think I just want to say that like Dino Lopinen, he's really diverse. He's made some ambient music and vaporwave, and he's also made kind of harsh noise with Garden of Delete. It's like he can be the nicest person you'll ever meet.
God damn it.
Yeah,
I can be your bleep, or I can be your boop.
But I do want to like give a quick shout out to like the best song name that I think I've ever read, which is Tales from the Trash Stratum, which is absolutely iconic.
Okay, I might cut this out, but can we talk about how the album cover is cum?
It hurts to look at. I rarely look at it sometimes.
It's weird because it's Robert Beatty who did the R+7 artwork, and that's I caught like it's one of the best album covers of the 2010s, and it's like it's basically a reunion between these two, because I don't think he did the Age of cover. And it's like, all right, it's like, okay, so like Dan's like, okay, I want something that's sort of, obviously my album, Betrayed in the Octagon. I kind of want something, I want to kind of like a slight reference to that a little bit, and I want sort of be like, also like kind of like similar to some of the themes in the last record, because you had the guy in the hazmat suit in the quarantine, like the thing, like if you like look at it, it looks like the quarantine symbol. And then Robert's like, I gotcha. And then Danny's looking like, oh, this is kind of simple, like, can you add something a little special to it? And Robert's like, I got you. Come.
Turn up that cum dial, brother.
God. God.
Beatty also did the Currents album cover, right?
Yeah, it looks a lot like Currents.
Yeah, he did the Currents cover, which again, one of the only good things about Currents is the fact that the album cover is like, it's pretty sick. Like I think the album cover is although I do like some of the single artwork a bit. It'd
be looking like a damn pair of nuts on the Currents album cover. Let me tell you what.
Yeah.
Oh god, because he also does a bunch of OC's album artwork, and like the most recent OC's record has like a donkey's asshole, like a painting of that.
Oh yeah,
the OC's got to stop. I tell you, they gotta. I love them, but they got to stop.
Never.
Oh, all right, but yeah, let's
Speaking
move
of
on.
donkeys and nuts.
I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna cut that, Will. I cannot. That cannot be our fucking. That's not gonna be our segue.
I had the order mixed up here.
That's not gonna be our segue. Our segue is just gonna be what I'm saying right now. Let's move on to number 3 on our list. Waxahachie, Saint Cloud.
Woo-hoo.
AJ,
look,
I will let you take it away.
The motherfucking goat riding in on a big Ford truck. St. Cloud is such a special album. I think that it landed kind of in a rough period of the year, let's say. It was late. It was late March, I believe, or like the first week of April, perhaps.
Late March.
But it was like really the sort of week or two where you did not want to be releasing an album because it was still in the window of like, okay, like, you know, this month sort of sucks, but things are going to get back to normal pretty soon. And so the press cycle for this album was perhaps a little bit understated, but I remember like right in the week before this album came out, I got really, really into the singles, which I believe were, it was, you know, one of the best runs in this album. That's Can't Do Much, Fire, and Lilacs. And I was just listening to those songs obsessively. And it was one of those instances where I was like, I think this album is going to fucking land. Like, I think that it's going to get a big fat best new music from pitchfork.com. And I really think it's going to blow TF up. And this was my album of the year for most of the year. It's, you know, my second favorite record of the entire year. And I really think it is a masterclass from someone who's been putting out incredible records for a very long time. Katie Crutchfield truly never, ever once, not once in her life has missed. But St. Cloud is perhaps the crowning achievement of her career. It is such an accomplished record that ties in all of her songwriting styles and harkens back to like a truly bygone era of like female led folk music and sort of country stylings. And just every song on this thing chugs along, hits, is infectiously catchy, is charmingly well written. And this album is just good vibes from top to bottom.
Yeah, I love this record too. I've long said that pretty much every singer-songwriter, unless they have like a really good thing going, they should just make it an alt-country album. Let's drop something.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, I mean, everyone should. And she does it, and she just shows like this is what every other songwriter could have if they just made this pivot.
Right. She makes it look so easy on this album, where you kind of like, if you think and sit and dissect most of these songs, they're very like, I don't know, basic music theory and sort of just like
absolutely
verse, chorus, verse, bridge, sort of like structurally. And there are no big tricks in the writing or anything like that, outside of maybe like Oxbow or St. Cloud. But this record is a testament to just the power of incredible songwriting and great lyrics, great instrumentation. Like, there's nothing too complicated going on with any of the chord progressions, or no wild instrumentation really on any of the tracks, but they are all just so compelling and so great. Her voice, I don't think, has ever sounded better than it does on these tracks. And it's like,
that's what I was trying to say. Like, she was supposed to make this record. Like, she was doing the indie rock punk thing. It was okay. Like, that was okay. Like, she has never made a bad record, but before this one, she never really, in my opinion, never made a great record. But this one, just like, this is her voice. This is her Alabama coming out. And it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's really heavily indebted to Lucinda Williams.
Big time.
If you never listened to the album Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, check that out. In 2019, I got really into that record, and it's one of my all-time favorites.
Foundational.
Yeah, Lucinda truly never missed as well. I think also, conversely, like, a funny thing that happened this year was both Katie and Kevin Morby dropped their own albums that felt like inspired by their partnership. You know, they're like in each other's music videos, and you can feel that loose collaboration. And I'm sure, I've never looked through the liner notes, but I'm sure that there's instrumentation from both of them on each of those other records. And Sundowner, the Kevin Morby record, which is one that like has grown on me over time, feels that like
that was a memory hold one too.
It's actually quite special in my estimation. It's like reclusive for him and steps back into doing just like a very muted and understated thing, whereas this album is just so like, you know, this album is fireworks. It's basically big time pop styled alt country that's just explosive and catchy and so bubbly and invigorating. Every song on here, like, there isn't a weak moment on this album, in my opinion. It is like basically perfect. It's, you know, very, very close to the best album of the year.
Chorus of the year. That's a fucking winner right there.
I think it's sequenced super well too, where like, you know, the songs, the styles of them all never get to like, it never settles into like, right, this is the album I'm listening to. It's a brisk 40 minutes, and all of the songs are just so, unique and so
I
well
think he
styled.
does a good job like putting like the ballads between the more up tempo songs. So like you
Yeah,
don't get
and
tired of either.
something like Hell or The Eye, where she starts like playing around with delivery or structure after the first like third of the album, which is the big like pop hitters, like the 3 lead singles, again, are like structured right at
Also
the
is
top
actually
of this
kind of a
record.
weird. It's kind of a weird opening track for this album. I've actually kind of like I don't like it, it's not really a harbinger for what the rest of the album is. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
but in the same way that Saint Cloud is such a muted conclusion to the album as well, I think it sort of opens. It's like it's almost cinematic in a way where Oxbow is like, the kind of like curtains opening, or like the
Right.
Simpsons intro where we're descending in from the clouds, and then Saint Cloud itself, clouds there, haha. Saint Cloud itself as the closer is like, a very like bold kind of finale where it's like essentially a solo of just her vocals. Saint Cloud. Shouts out to Alex. We must mention that Saint Cloud, truly undefeated. The song itself, St. Cloud, where the record is Saint Cloud spelled out.
Yeah, I've always thought that was interesting. I don't know what that means, but what's the Knives Out meme? Like I don't know what it means, but
it compels me. Yeah.
so that's exactly how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think you said that Lilacs is kind of the one for you, right? Chorus of the year, but Can't Do Much has always been the one for like.
That was the first song I heard. The first single I heard. I only heard about a week before the record out. I think Charlie Bliss. Shout out Charlie Bliss. They put it on their playlist of like songs they were enjoying. I'm like, wait a second, she's doing this now.
That's about what happened to me too. Yeah, it was like right around a week before the album came out. I was like, I've loved everything I've ever heard from Waxahachie. The Crutchfields are great, but like these songs, these 3 are on another level. And then all of St. Cloud is just, that shit's just hitting different. I really don't know what else to say other than like this album is fucking fantastic for 40 minutes.
That's it.
I think that'll do it then. Let's get to our number 2. Well, AJ, you're not getting a break here. You're not getting a break here. Our number 2.
Speaking of albums that are fantastic from start to finish for roughly 40 minutes, number 2 we got Da Microphones in 2020. Mr. Phil Elverum dropped a song / music video / art film / book / record this year that defies categorization, defies any actual explanation or expectation. Truly one of the most audacious art experiments of the year that is like on its face should be such a self-serious flagellation and celebration, self-mythologizing piece of work, but leave it to the wonderful and mystical Phil Elverum to turn this 45-minute single song record into probably the most profound and moving experience I've had all year. This is my favorite album of the year, The Microphones in 2020, and I wrote a big fat piece for the Indieheads subreddit about it where I really exercised all of my thoughts on this thing. But it's hard to know what to expect when a guy like Phil Elverum, especially after the last few records he's put out and the last few years he's had, comes up and says, hey, I'm returning to the Microphones moniker. I am putting out a 1-song 45-minute album in like 2 months. I think this thing was announced very short to the time that it was released. It's gonna kind of just be a thing. It is a song about how I made the microphones and how that process has changed over time and has influenced my life. And wouldn't you know it, it is this strange, captivating journey through one man's personal life and the labyrinths of his mind and his relationships to history, and a reflection on the very nature of creation and what it means to take up one name and produce art and live your life under the guise of certain expectations and to be perceived publicly in a way. This album goes to so many different and interesting places, but one of my favorites to just dive right into is the bit towards the end of the song where he's talking about touring with Bonnie Prince Billy. And there's this one section that he delivers where he's talking about, it's a very like Lynchian turn of phrase, but he talks about like who is the seer and the hearer in the crowds, like when you're standing and watching a show, like who does the art itself belong to? And you know, this album song is just Phil's reflection on like why should, you know, if it's a Microphones album or a Mount Erie album matter, if it's one song or one album matter, like where do the breakdowns, who gets to decide all of that stuff? So here it just is. And I think like, yeah, I said it, like it should feel almost like a parody, but he imbues it with so much meaning, and it's like a transfixing experience. I think the instrumentation on it, it's mostly just 2 guitar chords strummed up and down for 45 minutes. And part of that is a big, close to 8-minute intro. And then there are some like shinier spatial instrumental bits towards the middle, but it's a real fucking journey. And I think anybody should hop on it. I highly recommend watching it with the visuals that are on YouTube. But Phil has been on, I don't want to say like, you know, a streak or anything like that, but Phil's been in like a very, probably the most prolific period of his career, aside from perhaps the Glow Part 2 in the past few years. And I know it's been a very like unimaginably tragic period to live through as a human being, and that he's managed to turn around and turn it into some of the most compelling art of the 21st century. Like, again, who even knows what he's going to do after this now? I feel like he's sort of entering a new creative period post the Microphones in 2020, which is obviously post Now Only and A Crow Looked at Me. And just like, again, as we were saying with One of Tricks But Never, like it feels good to just like, you got to root for Phil in this period, because he's just, it feels good to listen to this album and to hear him plainly stating all of these things.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, as someone, again, I thankfully had time to just to stay out of my day to watch when the video premiered, and just like my 2 most profound experiences listening to this record. One was back in November, I think. Let's see, when did this record come out? Was it in September?
August.
It was like the middle of August. Yeah.
Okay.
August 1st,
Okay. I just need to clarify the timeline. So the second most profound time was when I was driving home from Ohio, when I was with my girlfriend for a weekend.
Sick brag.
And we'll hash this out after the podcast is done recording. But it was a very profound experience, like on like an Indiana highway, like listening to this record, you know, just like as the sun was like starting to come down. Just, it was very profound. I was like, I like the record, but I'm not sure if I love it. But that was the one that confirmed that I love this record. And obviously the first one I found was just like watching the video as it premiered, just seeing like all these photographs and just how many memories he has attached to this time, and just how well he I guess in a way archived these memories in a way, because like you can't really say that even in the social media generation. Like, you can only say however much stuff is, for me personally, like I don't have a whole lot of stuff that's archived from like events and whatnot in my life, just because like I'm not one to take photos and take videos of everything going on. Like I'm not a guy who posts on my Instagram stories of every fun thing that I'm doing. But yeah, the video, of course, and obviously the chat. It's
Phil popped off. Phil popped off.
It's I told this when we discussed this album back in like September for the Q3 catch up. I know that I said that like because we requested Phil for an AMA on the subreddit. They said, oh no, probably not, because he's just gonna be doing this live chat thing. And then like a week later, it's like, yeah, actually Phil will do the AMA. Like, let us know when you're available.
You can only spam Phil say poggers one too many times.
Rock and roll, pee my pants.
It's not fucking sad.
That's the best moment of the chat replay. But
like, yeah, it is not fucking sad. Like this is like it's not a sad record, whereas obviously like the last couple of Phil records have been obviously just like really, really depressing to listen to at times. This record, there's a certain hopefulness in there that is really, really profound and really like needed.
As we mentioned on the or as Jake and Alex have talked about mostly on the Discog breakdown for Phil, like it's pretty fucking funny, and Phil's a little trickster. He's a little goof. He's got some chaos mode. Like Phil Elverum is perhaps the Joker. We should investigate him. But there are some just like
his Blink 155 interview. We have to talk about that.
Yeah, it's like it's the second best thing he's done this year. But yeah, he's like a funny dude with a great sense of humor, and a lot of that like comes through on this with just like the extended diatribe about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and all of the playful stuff where he talks about like Stereolab playing one chord for 15 minutes, and then that leads right into this big instrumental drone section. Like there's stuff that just makes you like lean back and go like, damn, man's really making music here. It's good as hell.
The whole diatribe about his brother, like again getting dirty and like them having to like like hold his naked ass above the fire.
It's like my man, you have been making music for like what, close to 30 years, just about driving around like the Pacific Northwest. Like we get it, homie. You like the state of Washington.
but yeah, no, this is a great record. Like it is like, I think it is a proper return of the microphones. Like it does feel like, you know, it wasn't right to have the microphones come back for a long time. Like I think like he was pretty content doing the Mount Erie stuff, and I feel like this is like for this song idea, like this is the perfect way to bring the microphones back if he does end up bringing them back after this, because for all we know this could just be like a one-off and then he's back doing Mount Erie for a little bit.
That's like really what it feels like for me. Or even a situation where like, is he going to start putting out music as like Phil Elverum now, or will there be a new name? Like the kind of trick about this record is that it doesn't fucking matter. Like yes, it does make perfect sense as a return to form for the microphones. Yes, you could make the argument that just like, well, it kind of does sound like a Mount Erie, like there's no stylistic differences. Yes, you could make the argument that like there should just be like there are some clean breaks in the subject matter or the sounds of the songs. He could have not made it one song, but like none of that really well and truly matters, and that's sort of the point of the microphones in 2020.
Because like this is like, it's a record that is like kind of self-mythologizing, but like not really. It's more or less just like, you know, it's like Phil, he's, you know, we're the kids and we're like, Grandpa, tell us a story. And it's like, well, here's the story about how I started a band called the Microphones.
It's like 7 stories at once, all intersecting and across, you know, time and space.
How I Met Your Microphone.
Sure, if that's what you want to say.
But yeah, no, this is a great record. Like it's just, it's difficult to bring thoughts, because obviously the fact that it is one song, so it is hard to figure out like, well, what do we talk like? Well, I like the like this section, like obviously the fact that it takes its time to like really build in, because like, you know, the first listen was like, okay, he's just playing this chord. It's like in Twin Peaks: The Return during that sweeping thing. It's like, okay, so when's this gonna become something? But you know, it's like, I think we've talked in the past about how connected Phil Elverum's music is to like Twin Peaks. Obviously, just the fact that, you know, both are in Washington, but this really does feel like, you know, it is like Phil's, you know, sort of his version of The Return, where it's like, you know, like have some patience, you know, like this isn't, you know, there's not going to be any grand, you know, I Want Wind to Blows or, you know, the Globe Part 2s. Like we're not going to have that here. Like this is the Microphones this many years later. Like I've had a lot of time to reflect on
the Microphones
on
in
this
2020.
Time. Exactly,
in,
baby.
in the
Exactly.
Microphones in the hell year.
Microphones in the year of our Lord and Savior. Okay, first and foremost.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this is a great record. I think AJ, you've said it really well in your Indieheads review. Like this is just, you got to listen to it and support Phil too. Like, you know, if you can buy this on Bandcamp, buy this on Bandcamp or on his website. Like it is worth whatever price he's offering for it. It is worth it 100%.
Toss my man's $9.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think because he put it on a Bandcamp Friday, right?
Yeah.
So like everything went to him. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I only listened to this album once. It was the day that it came out, and I watched the stream. I don't really have anything to add. It just to me, it was very singular. I only had to experience it once, but it was a very profound experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting there
Like,
watching the photos flip, like I mean, it's like they don't, like there's like not like a specific meaning to the photos. It's just kind of like one of those kind of things that just kind of trigger or stimuli. Like recently, my mom was showing me pictures of like her childhood and everything, and that just kind of just brings a rush of emotions. It's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, like okay, that's a good point that I want to bring up is that I feel like in the past couple of years, I mean, really since the dawn of music, really since when music criticism became a thing, where I feel like people really do value replay value. Of course, like people do put that as a big, when people talk about why they like a record, like replay value is going to be a big thing for a lot of people. But I feel like this record, like you don't need to replay it constantly. Like there's some people that do. I mean, AJ, how many times have you heard this record?
Quite a few, yeah.
So, but for me, I've only heard this album maybe like a half a dozen times, maybe. But like, I don't need to listen to it all the time. Like just that first experience, and I only need to come back to this every month or so, and it still hits the same because just like it's all about the way that it made you feel at the time. This isn't like it's a 45-minute long song. Like it's hard. It demands your attention. Like you gotta, if you're gonna get into it, you have to really set out your time and day to like kind of dive into it. Even though it's a short, 45 minutes, it's not very long for an album, but like as a song where it's like it's 45 minutes, like basically uninterrupted. There's no like, okay, I'm gonna pause after this song. It's like, no, you got to sit through the entire thing.
It's a damn podcast.
It is a damn podcast, folks. Phil Elverum, he's trying
really
to step
is
on our territory.
2020.
He's trying to step on our territory, and Phil, you are allowed to. We would love to have you on this podcast if you want to do a podcast crossover. Now that you've invested your invested your assets into the podcasting world, but yeah, that'll about do it for number 2, I think. Unless we had any extra thoughts we wanted to give on this record.
It good.
It's good. All right, number 1.
Numero uno.
To do
I bet you can't
countdown.
guess what this one is.
I bet you can't guess this. And before we count down number 1, let's do a one.
That's right.
One
it's the new
countdown.
Abnormal by the Strokes, baby.
No, it's not.
He couldn't commit to the bit.
I can't even commit. I don't like the bit. I can't.
Brooklyn Bridge to number 1, New York, baby. We love the fucking Strokes, baby.
All right.
That's a good bit. Guido, Strokes fan.
Yeah.
Well, again, before we start number 1, again, a recap on the top 10. Number 10, it was a tie between Doglegs Melee and Young Jesus' Welcome to Conceptual Beach. Number 9, Adrian Linker, Songs. Number 8, Black Dresses. I already forgot the name of
Peaceful
the album.
as Hell.
Thank you. Number 7, Nicholas Jar, Cinzias. Number 6, Jeff Rosenstock, No Dream. Number 5, Phoebe Bridgers, Punisher. Number 4, Winnow Tricks Point Never, Magic Winnow Tricks Point Never. Number 3, Waxahachie St. Cloud. Number 2, The Microphones in 2020. And number 1, again, as Will said, it's not a shocker. Number 1, Fiona Apple, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Like, duh. And by a fucking wide, what was the margin on
like
this?
literally
Okay.
double.
Okay, so the way that we choose our album of the year is that we basically just like do a tally, and it's sort of like what the subreddit does, where it's like if you put an album as like your number 1 spot, it gets 10 points. If you put an album at your number 10 spot, it gets like 1 point, and I tally all of that together, and we get all this. So spots like 4 through 10 were basically all within like a couple points of each other. It was really close. Waxahachie and Phil were like a sizable lead above both of those, like double-digit lead above those. And then Fiona Apple is like got like 3 times the amount of like points attributed to her than like all of the albums on the rest of this list. Like she blew it out of the water in terms of our tally. It was the most resounding like album of the year I think that has ever been on this podcast. Like 6 or 7 people on our cast put it as number 1, which is like I don't. It's unheard of. Like no one's ever. We've never had like that much consensus around.
Not even the
an album
Gremlins have that much power.
Not the Gremlins. Not
What was
even
our
like
album of the year last year?
yeah.
It was Black
it was
Midi.
Black Midi.
It was Black Midi. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Black Midi. Like there's like this is the biggest like consensus we've ever had on an album of the
Folks,
year.
it's a damn good record. It's a dang bop.
Yeah, like I think it's backlash proof as well, pretty much. Like it's sort of universally, undeniably a fantastic album. The way that I like to do things when I like put together my personal list, which really doesn't matter at all whatsoever, but like in December, I like to go back and like listen to everything again. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't even revisit Fetch the Bolt Cutters outside of like the songs that made my like most played or whatever, because I like know that this album is fucking fantastic. And when it landed, it was so like meteoric. I'm still very thankful that I listened to it like right at midnight when it dropped and basically finished it, because it's close to an hour long, right before it was then legendarily the only other album of the decade that Pitchfork has given a 10 to. I feel like that, points the conversation in one way, regardless of merit or not. But like, I'm very glad that my first experience with this album was taken on my own terms. But the thing I keep coming back to is just like how immediately it just felt like a fucking instant classic album, where like there are moments and there are lyrics and there are sounds on this album that are just like, yeah, I feel like these have existed for the entire time that I've been around and listening to music. Like, oh, this album came out in like April. And like by a week after it had dropped, every like, it was commonplace to talk about Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Oh, like
It was the
this
canon.
yeah, like it was an instant classic in a way that like we have not had in a very long time.
I don't think since Kendrick, since
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah, like
maybe Blonde, but I think that one took that's a like
Blonde was a grower. Blonde was a grower. Yeah,
but
this
people
one just landed.
It was Frank though, just because people just like would be like 2 tracks and GOAT already.
Yeah. Because I mean, I just not to go too much into Frank, but like Frank, that was like, and I totally grow, because it was like I think it only got like an 8.5 from Pitchfork, and then eventually got to its album of the decade.
Yeah,
like it was a record that like because even personally at the time, like I couldn't wrap my head around it until like maybe like listen number 9 or 10, where I was like, oh, okay, this is a great record. But nevertheless, the Fiona record. Actually, before we go to
this one was an immediate like once you got to that transition from I Want You to Love Me to Shamika, that's a line in the sand. Like if you're not in at that moment,
yeah, the first song is just like, yup, this is a masterpiece.
That second verse, like I blow with the trees in the breeze, that's the best verse. One of the top 5, maybe all time verse. Like that just
yeah, and
I was gonna say that is one of the more interesting things about this record, is that like let's just be, it's instantly a modern classic, and despite being like a very like record that's very experimental and strange in nature, just instantly you're like, oh, it's simultaneously able to play to both these worlds, and it's such like a really fascinating where it's like it's very clear like the way that she's like arranging this stuff, and the textures are like obviously percussion, like just the fact that continuing on with the Eye of the Wheel and like this really strange percussion choices.
Yeah,
but like even vocally, she's just trying out so many new things and just like letting herself free. But even then, like it's still a record that's like it's still very approachable on a first listen. Like I wasn't like, what is going on? It's like instantly I'm like, oh, this is something really special.
I don't want to fixate on the Pitchfork review too much, but I think the line that like it sounds like nothing else, or like there is no music that sounds quite like this, is incredibly apt. It's like listening to musical theater, like a stage recording of some elaborate Broadway play or whatever, but it's, a one-woman show, and it's incredibly personally directed and upfront by Fiona, and it's funny, it's smart, it's witty. I think it's undeniable, this album.
Under the Table, that's a hilarious song.
Yeah, like it is both funny and incisive and incredibly smart. It's just an intelligent, all-around masterclass of an album.
For me, it's okay. So forget I'm the Will for Thrill leader of the Will for Thrill Nation. Pretend I'm a New York fancy music critic. All right. long in music circles, there have been debates over whether the piano is a percussion instrument or a string instrument. Do the strings of the piano make it inherently a string instrument, or do the mallet striking the strings make it a percussion instrument? Fiona Apple makes her position well known on "Fetch the Bolt Cutters." It's a percussion instrument. It's a percussion album.
Damn, he said
I
that.
thought you were saying it's both. Baby,
I thought you were about to go. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
both.
no, that's actually the correct answer. Is that it's both? But yeah, no. She slaps the hell out of that piano. I'll tell you.
I mean,
what.
I think you're certainly right. There's a song on this album called Drum Set, and like,
Right.
yeah, the
And
sort of
then the last song is just pretty much all. I don't think there's any piano on that one. Just like tribal drum circles.
yeah, like atmospherically and ambiently, the song, like the sounds of this album is just like Fiona banging on shit and
I
just
think that's
like
literally how most of the song. Like she didn't even have like a tune. Like she would just be like
Yeah.
out by the lake, just like pounding on drums and be like, "Oh, this
straight up spitting bars. She's got the venom on this album.
And then, did y'all read that going back to Pitchfork? Did y'all read that interview with her?
Yeah.
Coincided
of
with
course, right.
Do you think that she was like she said that all the songs are literal? Do you think she meant that, or do you think she was just fucking with us?
I think in some ways, I mean, it.
Like with like the Ferris
I don't think
wheel
it should,
story and
I don't think
everything?
she was fucking. I don't think she was fucking with Jinpei. I do think like it's some like Fiona is a very like at this point in time. Like I think one thing that's been very interesting about her evolution in the last like. I mean, really, I guess 2 decades with like 3, like 3 albums is like seeing Idler Wheel where she was like really being a lot more literal, like not trying to be. I mean this obviously in a very nice way, like not trying to be pretty, not trying to appeal to somewhat of a pop audience, just being very much more genuine and true to herself. And I feel like this record like continues on that. Like I think I mentioned this at the time. It's like I feel like her career evolution. I think the closest artist I can think of that's had a career evolution like her is like Scott Walker, of like going from.
Oh yeah, of course.
This. I mean, yeah, I know. Like again, there's like 3 artists there's like 2 artists that I mention every episode: Dean Blunt and Scott Walker. But I think it's apt here because I feel like Fiona didn't exactly start as like a teen, as like making like teen pop or anything, but like she was a teen pop star. Like there was a time where she was one of the biggest musicians on the planet at a very, very young age. Only 18 years old when Tidal came out. But obviously just having these years
Billie
where she
Eilish.
was. We'll have to see with Billie. We'll have to see with
I'm
Billie. 'Cause I
really
think
interested to see about her trajectory, just the way she is the next 20 years.
Yeah. But nevertheless with Fiona, we're like basically going from this sort of teen pop star, but very clearly not really wanting to play the industry's game and taking, years off between records. Sometimes it's because like, hey, it takes a while for the songs to come. And other times it's just like, in the case of Extraordinary Machine, like that was a record that was done for like a year or 2 before it came out, but the label was just being stupid. But like Idler Wheel and this album, like these were albums, they were like labors of love. Like they really took their time to put these together, but yeah, and here's the thing, like the fact that the album ends on like its most experimental song, it's most experimental and like at least sonically like it's like the darkest song on the record. It's got me really interested in like 9 years when we get the next Fiona album.
Oh baby,
like what that's gonna sound like, of like if she's gonna keep going in this darker direction. But again, this record it's compared to Idler Wheel, like it's a much lighter record at times. Like it's much more. Whereas
what about
Idler
her?
Wheel.
For her,
Like I said, I mean, there's like not everything is lighter, obviously. Like, but this album has like a lot of, as we've said, just a lot of like funny light moments, like "Ladies" and "Under the Table" and "Shamika." Like these are like songs that have like the sort of
Rack of His, the Father John
Rack of
Misty
His.
roast of the century.
God,
like there's a lot of funny songs on this record. There's a lot of light-hearted songs on this record. Like even like in the case of like Shamika, like dealing with like a relatively heavy subject matter of like childhood bullying, but still making it like kind of
it's like
light
also
and
like
funny
heavy, but it's like because everyone was bullied as a child,
exactly.
And but like
It's on some Wes
I love how
Anderson
specific she is about this. Like I don't know, like just like having a name, just having the name attached to the person who told her that she had potential just means a lot. And then you read the other piece about her. She reconnected with Shamika this year, became friends, and that just to me is just really special.
Exactly. Like this is it is truly the album. Like I don't think we've had like a critical consensus, like as we mentioned,
Since
like
2015,
T-Pab.
that was the last time I think there was like a real critical consensus.
Yeah, it's just like this is the album of the year. Like obviously there's certain places that are not putting it album of the year, but like honestly, like no offense, you're fooling yourselves. Like is it my personal album of the year? No, as we all know, it's Making a Door Less Open. But is this like a really strong number 2? Like yeah, of fucking course is number 2. Like why? Like where? Like you. Folks, you gotta hand it to her. Like this is like you gotta. You actually truly have to hand it to her.
You do have to hand it to Fiona Apple
on all instances, and of course she's gonna win the Grammy for album of the year. That just makes natural sense. Hold on a sec. Somebody just slid an envelope across my desk here. Oh, apparently this was not nominated for album of the year. My mistake. The critical consensus, I guess, was off.
We didn't talk about the Grammy. Have we talked? We should know, absolutely under no.
We did.
I was on the Grammy episode. I made a damn fart noise come out of my mouth.
There was a Grammy episode.
We talked about it on I think the last. I think we talked about it on the Thanksgiving cast. We talked about the Grammys a little bit. Yeah. But nevertheless, but as we mentioned, I was like a lot of but also like some of the darkest moments that we've heard on a Fiona record, like Newspaper. Like that one is fucking brutal at times, and for her, like, I'm not gonna say why that won't, like. Yeah,
I mean, when the line comes, I mean, you can't escape that line. Like it just hits like.
I think the album, like, it's ironic, Matty. You were getting at a thing where you were saying like this is sort of undeniably the album of 2020, and to me, it's sort of ironic that it's like an album that was almost entirely composed and put together outside of the realities of this year and just ended up being this big album about like, personal liberation and, being a human caught up in these larger social causes that mean things more than yourselves. All big things that actually came to resonate much more powerfully in 2020, not to diminish the power of this record in any way, but I just think that it's so perfectly like, Fetch the Bolt Cutters is a title what implies, locks being thrown off and the removal of being tied down. And again, this inherent liberation and the celebratory nature that comes in the process of freeing and being freed. And that's a feeling that basically every human being on the planet Earth was denied this year for the most part. And so to have this sort of sonic celebration of those feelings, and from someone who's so great at imbuing their own songs with such a personal resonance as Fiona Apple, like it's obvious, first of all, that this record is fucking fantastic on its own rights, but it's obvious that it made such a meteoric impact this year because it really is just sort of undeniable.
And that's a banger of an album title. Can we talk about that?
And an instant classic album cover as well. It's such a fucking flex that this like pick art Microsoft clip looking just like stitched together font, half of a dog face and a close-up of Fiona's Apple's eye right next to a 10.0 on pitchfork.com. That's just like the perfect little that owns to me.
No, what was interesting also from that interview is apparently she had that album title for a long time, but she had the album title before the song, like a year before the song.
If I had that album title, I would just sit on it for decades until the moment came. I'm like, yeah, that's a heat. That's
she got it from like a random random network drama or whatever. Just like someone said that line, and she's like, "That's it. That's the album title."
I think it was some kind of British crime show, and it was Gillian Anderson who said the lines, "Fetch the bolt cutters." So
they said
that there was also a screen cap. Yeah, there was a Soprano screen cap where Tony's just sitting there and is like, "Get the bolt cutters."
He says, "Paulie, get the bolt cutters out of the trunk," which would also be a good title for this album.
Oh god.
Okay, wait, hold on. So remember how when Be the Cowboy was album of the year, and then goofball Mac DeMarco came out with Here Comes the Cowboy? Who's gonna do that for Fetch the Bolt Cutters next year?
Oh boy. Mitski.
I'm trying to think. Okay, it's got to be so like if we're basically two artists that blew up around the same time. So like we got to think. Okay, some like '90s alternative indie act.
But it's got to be like a chauvinist male shithead who's like doing it ironically and doesn't understand.
Creed.
Honestly, the timelines don't match up very much, but my money's on Morrissey coming out with an album that's like,
baby, yes.
Grab the can opener or some shit. Boy, mate.
But instead about being but instead of being about sort of being liberated,
It's about liberals.
This liberating statement
It's going to be about getting
feminism.
your Twitter account locked for swearing too much or some shit. I don't know.
I was gonna say more about lockdowns because that's what all these like fucking like British boomers like Van Morrison and
For some
Derek
reason,
Clapton
British dudes are the ones that are the most against lockdowns. I don't get it.
They got to go out on the street and get their fish and chips and shit.
As we have established throughout this year, being British is a mental illness. Like it is a mental illness. There are some British people that again they have the mental illness, but you know what? I accept them. I love them in my heart. Black Midi, Black Country New Road. But here's the thing: they gloss over their Britishness with their gremlinness. So it's like okay, they wash themselves over. But like Morrissey, they're British. They're just terrible. Again, it's a terrible failed state of a country. Like fucking we saw what happened with Jezza.
Morrissey is an enemy of the Gremlin cause. He is not an ally. He must be canceled.
I agree. I'm in total
Hashtag
agreement.
cancel Morrissey.
Oh God. Okay, I'm not sure we're gonna have as good a time as any. So there might be a certain voice is missing from this podcast. Rose was originally planning on joining us for this episode, but again they had to drop out last second. But they did give us a recording to play about Fetch the Bolt Cutter, so we're gonna use that time right now to play the clip. Take it away, Paulie.
Hi, y'all. So, seeing as there's likely going to be 0 women on tonight's episode of the podcast, and looking at our number 1 pick, I had to send in this emergency recording. I'll make my thoughts quick, and I just need to get my word in here. So, to put it simply, Fetch the Bolt Cutters is the kind of release that I'll rarely ever see in my lifetime. It's a record that everyone knew would have the potential, and somehow, impossibly, lift up to all of it. In that broader sense, it rules. And it's amazing to see something so immediately recognized for its mastery. Now, in another more personal sense, I have to say, I really needed this record at the time it came to me. I tried to get it across in the initial discussion episode, but at the beginning of this year, I was in the days of trying to gain a better understanding of myself. This record and all of her other work gave me a voice to place myself in front of and just feel okay with presenting a kind of vulnerability that I'd never been able to place before. And in that sense, it's always going to have a place in my heart as a perfect piece of art for me. Beyond that, it's a continuation of everything that's made Idler Wheel my favorite record of all time. Her instrumental work is inventive, pairing the kind of sparse and rattling focus upon percussion that defined the previous record with an even greater focus on her own voice, allowing it to bloom outward in what feels like an incompatible musical landscape. That, along with a lyrical focus upon trying to find oneself amidst a lifetime of anger and persecution from all sorts of horrible people, shows genuine emotional growth and compassion from her in a way that I think next to no other writers could ever manage at the same level. In short, yes, this is the best record we'll talk about this year, and maybe the decade to come, but we'll see on the latter. Thanks for letting me drop this in.
Wow, Rose, that was very insightful what you said. I have not listened to the clip at all yet, so I'm going to assume it's very insightful and sweet and wonderful.
The bolt cutter's been
Rose.
fetched.
The bolt cutters have been fetched. So yeah, I mean I didn't have any extra. I think I said all I wanted to say about this record. It's fucking great. I mean, duh.
Album good.
Guy, duh.
Album. Oh my god. All right, well that'll do it for this episode. This may end up being our last proper episode of the year.
What a year it was!
What a year it was. I think I will say I think I'll probably do a solo bonus episode going over my own top 10 because I realized, oh shit, we need bonus content, and like, well, I could just riff by myself for a little bit about my own list. But yeah, that is the last. I think this will probably end up being our last proper podcast of the year. We may end up doing one more. We'll see. Well, it depends on how we're feeling and if there's anything that comes out that we are wanting to talk about. But in congruence with this podcast, probably in the description, we do have an actual top 25 written out list with blurbs and everything from the podcast crew. So that will be in the description of the public release of this episode. I think we're just gonna put this up on Patreon, just as is. So hey, if you're listening to this via Patreon, wait like 2 days, and then the list will be out proper, where you can get our full top 25 albums of the year. So yeah, that's all I want to say. That's all we got to say. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And in case we don't do another episode, we will see you all in the new year. And bye-bye.
This MIDI only available at supremenetwork.com/middies.